With great power comes great responsibility.
Compromise where you can. Where you can't, don't. Even if everyone is telling you that something wrong is something right. Even if the whole world is telling you to move. It is your duty to plant yourself like a tree, look them in the eye and say no. You move.
Never step onto the battlefield of ideas unprepared. Before you enter the fray, you need a plan. And there's no better place to get one than right here on Tactics with host Caleb Colquitt. The Situation Room goes live now on News Radio 1440.
Welcome in, everybody. Good afternoon to you on this Tuesday. And I have to say, for everybody joining us here on Tactics on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, Periscope, wherever you're joining us, we were actually trying to wait out the Senate, to where we would be able to give you breaking news about how the Senate decided on the abortion ban bill that is currently being discussed in the Alabama Senate. So you may recall we've been talking about this for a while. Our friend Becky Garrettson at Eagle Forum, Alabama was one of the ones that helped us get informed about this. We were talking about this Thursday and talked about calling your senator. So here's what's going on. Right now, the debate is still going on, not about the bill itself, about the amendment. So last I checked in, which was just a couple of minutes ago, I thought that I was going to be able to wait it out and see what the fate of it, at the very least, the amendment would be, if not the bill itself. Wasn't able to do that, was not able to wait it out. This is still going on right now as we're speaking, so unfortunately I can't tell you anything about the new developments. The amendment is being discussed. It is being debated. As expected, the amendment did not die on the vine, as it were. And granted, I didn't get to see a whole lot of the debate because I was doing prep for the show, but we were waiting it out. I kept checking back in. There's just no news yet. So I'm essentially coming on a news program to tell you that there's no news, and that's disappointing, but there is a hotly contested debate going on in the Senate right now, but as far as a verdict, either on the amendment or on the bill itself, there's not one. And the reason that the amendment is so important is really twofold. First of all, and this is there are two reasons, but the two reasons kind of coincide. The amendment that we're talking about would specifically allow for an exception for abortions in the cases of rape and incest. So in the cases of rape and incest, of course, if a baby were conceived through that manner, then that is something that would not be allowed to qualify for an abortion. Right now, the only exception is the health of the mother. Now, I want to dive pretty deep into this bill so I can give you a little bit of understanding of why this amendment is important, and also the bill itself and the merits of it. So the first reason that I just discussed, the first reason is the moral reason. And of course, if you're like me, if you're pro-life, if you believe the child in the womb is a child, it is a human being, then its life must be protected regardless of how it was conceived. Because if conception determines the value of a human life, then why does that change once the baby is born? In other words, if a baby were conceived through rape or incest, would that baby be not human when it's 5, or when it's 10, or when it's 30? Would it be okay to kill it at those points? Because if the way that it was conceived determines that, then it doesn't make any sense to say, okay, abortion's wrong and the person inside the womb is indeed a person, unless, of course, the baby was conceived through rape, in which case it's okay to off it. If you're following that logic, it makes no sense to make the argument, if conception is what determines your value of a human being, if that can disqualify you from the protections of a human life, then why would it cease to disqualify you once you make the short journey 8 inches up the birth canal? Why does that make it a distinction? And so the problem with that argument is, if the manner in which you were conceived determines your life's value, then why does that end as soon as you're born? It's an inconsistent position for anybody that's saying that rape and incest ought to be exceptions to the abortion rule. And I've always said this too. Don't you think incest is a really weird one? Like, those three things are always coupled together: rape, incest, and health of the mother. But they're all radically different. If we're talking about a baby that is conceived through a father and daughter, or a brother and sister, or any of the disgusting scenarios that could come up with incest taking place, this is a consensual thing. And in fact, I was just watching the debate on the Senate floor, and one of the representatives there was questioning another senator and asking why he supported this bill. And she said, if rape is committed against her or incest is committed against her. No, incest, if we're talking about something that is not rape, in other words, we're talking about a family member and two family members consensually, gross as this is, having sex with one another, and that resulting in a child, why are we lumping that in with rape? Because rape is obviously a different scenario, because there was at least one party that did not consent. There was at least one party that did not want to have sex or engage in an activity that could potentially produce a child. I've never understood why incest is always coupled with rape as though they're basically the same thing. If two adults, again, as gross and nasty and immoral as this is, if two adults are engaged in sexual intercourse with one another, knowing that there is at least the potential, even if you have birth control, of that resulting in a pregnancy, why are we punishing the child for their stupidity? Like, at least in the case of rape, there was one person that didn't consent to this. In the case of incest, presumably, because if not, it would, I guess you could have a family member raping another member, but again, that would make it fall under the umbrella of rape anyway, and so we would be dealing with rape between family members. But what I'm talking about here is, when we separate that category out as incest, why is the child's life then forfeit because of the stupidity of his parents? Because if we're going to take the value of a human's life away from it based on the stupid decisions of its parents, then there's a lot of children that we would have to kill. I mean, as horrible as that is to think about, I never have understood why incest, and I've never heard a good reason, a good argument for incest. I've heard people that are pro-choice, and even some that I would argue that they're not, that consider themselves pro-life, say that, but there should be an exception for incest. And I'm sitting there thinking, why incest? I mean, at least, even though I disagree with the position, and I think it's an easily defeatable argument, if you believe the child in the womb is indeed a child, I don't understand how you can get to rape ought to be an exception, but at least there I can at least understand that there is one person not involved in that decision-making process. Not the case with what we're talking about, and so I never have understood why they think that ought to be an exception and why it's lumped in with it. It's one of those things that you've kind of grown so accustomed to it, you probably just assume that that's the way that it's supposed to be. In other words, it's something that has been there so long, it's been such a standard that these two things go hand in hand when talking about possible exceptions for rape or possible exceptions for abortion, that we just kind of assume that they're supposed to be together. But I've always wondered why people don't stop and think, why is incest included in this? Now, again, if you're like me, it really doesn't matter. The circumstances surrounding your conception does not limit or inhibit or disqualify you from the protections of law that are afforded to every other human life. So for me, the distinction between the two is a non-issue, but I've always thought it very odd that people on the left, people that advocate for abortion, try to make the case that incest ought to be an exception. I never have really understood that one. And doing so, I guess you could make the case it's because that their quality of life is going to be lower, because the lack of genetic diversity that was involved in the creation of that child is going to result in, possible mental health issues or whatever. But A, that's not a guaranteed thing. And B, when we're talking about that, if you're going by that logic, then I suppose we should do what Iceland is doing and just destroying every child that is being diagnosed early with Down syndrome. Again, it's a completely immoral, illogical argument to make here, but nonetheless, that's the one that's being made. We will keep you updated on this, and it's been a really stressful week. I've had 1,000 different things to do. I've honestly barely been able to get show prep ready. So I'm not sure about tomorrow's show, but I'm going to do my dead level best to make sure that we have a show tomorrow, just if nothing else, so we can give you an update on the fate of this bill. But we will continue to keep you aware of the situation right here on Tactics and throughout the entire News Radio 1440 family. We even had some of the national hosts talking about this today, including Ben Shapiro. So until we have more news, that's just really all that we can give you right now, at least on that front. A couple other things that I did want to mention, and it's been making the national news rounds. Rashida Talib making an absolute fool of herself in an interview the other day. And again, my life has been incredibly chaotic. I'm moving, not just where I live, but also, and this is some exciting news, trying to get a brand new studio for Tactics set up. And we're going to look into, don't know for sure yet, so don't get too excited, but we're looking at having a completely new facility, a lot more capability, maybe even bringing on a couple extra staff members. That's all tentative, and that's going to be happening probably at the very base minimum 2 weeks into the future, but we may have to take a hiatus from the show to make some adjustments there. We'll do the best that we can to make sure that we're still airing content, but until that takes place, maybe a while. But like I said, we're going to try to bring it back tomorrow to give you an update on the fate of the abortion bill. And we'll try to be on Thursday as well to make sure that we get Becky Garrettson's take on this whole thing. But nonetheless, with Rashida Talib the other day, she made a couple of different comments, and we're going to go through really why they're problematic. First of all, she said that she was getting a calm feeling from the Holocaust and remembering that. I do think probably what happened, and I know that there's going to be some conservatives that disagree with me on that, on this. That's fine. I do think that in this particular case with Rashida Talib, probably what happened is she meant to say somber, and I understand she has a pretty solid track record of anti-Semitism, so I understand that there are people that are not giving her the benefit of the doubt. But that's the quote that everybody seems to be kind of zeroing in on. And I don't think that she, if nothing else, just from a PR standpoint, whether she believes it or not, would have been dumb enough to say that she is fine with the Holocaust and doesn't think it's a big deal. If nothing else, just because she knows that that would be political suicide, I don't think that she would have said that or even meant it. I think probably what she meant to say is that she has a sober feeling about the Holocaust, and it is a sobering feeling. I mean, considering the human evil that took place when 6 million Jews and assorted other groups that were targeted by the Nazis, considering what happened there is a sense of awe and somberness that ought to overtake you when considering the atrocities that were committed against the Jews and the others that were in the concentration camps. So that I don't take as much issue with. It was poorly worded, but I consider that probably to be more like a gaffe than an actual subtle jab at Israel. The rest of the statement is actually what I tend to have a pretty big problem with. For one, she said that there ought to be a two-state solution between Israel and a one-state solution between Israel and Palestine. There's a couple reasons why that's a really dumb thing to say. First of all, Rashida Talib is automatically going to be put under more scrutiny because of her blatant anti-Semitism over and over again that she continually spouts. She's not quite as bad on anti-Semitism as Ilhan Omar, but she's pretty bad. And when she says a two-state solution, when she says a one-state solution, when the two states, the states being Israel and the other primarily Muslim states surrounding them, whether you're talking about Jordan, Syria, the surrounding nations that are predominantly Muslim and run like Muslim countries. They are a theocracy, in essence. The reason that is problematic, and the reason the way she presented it is problematic, and I apologize, I don't have the full clip. You can find it online. Like I said, my life's been real chaotic the past couple weeks. My computer, I had to move, and that is no small feat with all the amount of equipment I have. So long story short, I didn't actually get the video clip, but you can watch it online, and you can see the whole thing. I encourage you to do that in full context. What's important to really note about the Rashida Talib comment is not the Holocaust, or not the thing about the Holocaust giving her a calming feeling, which granted at the very least smells fishy. The important thing is that she was talking about this one-state solution. And if you're looking at her comments and seeing what she's saying, she's essentially saying that she wants everybody to be in the same state, that she wants one government over the Middle East, and for everybody to just get along. And then she also makes a blatant incorrect statement about history, but we'll get to that in a second. So the reason that this is a problem, and the reason that this is offensive, I'm going to try to put it into terms that everybody can understand if you're not really keyed into, and I wouldn't consider myself an expert on Middle East politics, but if you're not really zeroed in and have been following what's been going on and understand the history and the background between the surrounding Muslim states and the state of Israel, this is an analogy that will kind of help you see what the problem is. Let's say that we had America and Mexico had been fighting for the past 100 years or so, since Mexico had been established as a state. And yes, I'm going to use America to kind of represent the Muslim countries merely because they have more military power and they're much larger. So in this scenario, little bitty Mexico that doesn't have near the economic or political sway that America does. In this scenario, America is constantly firing rockets. There is a sense of hostility, and in America's Constitution, in this crazy mixed up scenario that I'm presenting here, in America's Constitution, it specifically says that their goal is the complete elimination of the Mexican state, and all Hispanics must die. That was actually a part of their constitution, because for many of these surrounding Muslim states that border Israel, that's a part of their founding documents. And let's say that in this scenario, that there were elected officials in other countries that were saying that they support a one-state solution for America and Mexico, and America has been trying to conquer Mexico and tried to take that land back for close to a century now. And you're saying that you want a one-state solution where everybody becomes one world government. Well, why is that going to be a problem? Because that would essentially be America accomplishing its goal of obtaining Mexico in this crazy doomsday scenario that I just presented. Because if there is only one state, and that state encompasses everybody, who do you think's going to be in charge of the land? Who do you think is going to be calling the shots? The very tiny nation of Israel, or the surrounding nations that hate Israel, and have specifically stated that the elimination of the Jewish race and the Israel state is a intended goal of their country? Do you really think Israel's going to get a fair shake in that? Do you really think that synagogues and holy sites are going to be preserved in Jerusalem and in other cities in Israel if that takes place? Do you really think that there's not going to be severe racial and religious persecution? Because, of course, Judaism is both a race and a religion. Do you really think that's going to take place? What Rashida Talib is essentially suggesting here is for the goal of the Arabs surrounding Israel to take place, for them to be conquering Israel and to have control over that land. Because if we put it to a popular vote, and the Middle East was one giant superstate, you think the Jews are going to be there very long? You think they're not going to face severe religious persecution? Remember, these are people that believe it is their religious obligation to have their religion running the government. You see, unlike Christianity, both Judaism and Islam are theocracies. They believe that it is part of their religion to have a nation. Christianity is not like that. You can be a Christian in any nation under any jurisdiction that you want. That's not the case with Islam. With Islam, politics and government are a part of the religion. You can't separate the two. It is designed to be a theocracy. And let's also imagine that this person that made this comment about in the scenario that I just gave, America and Mexico, had been somebody who has a map of North America in her congressional office and has the United States of America, and directly to the south, where Mexico is supposed to be, has a Post-it note posted over Mexico and has the words America written on it. You think this would be somebody that is in favor of America controlling Mexico? Well, in this scenario, that's exactly what took place. Rashida Talib, in her office, as far as I know to this day, has a map that includes the Middle East, and over the state of Israel has a Post-it note and has the word Palestine written on it. This is someone who does want a one-state solution. She just wants the Muslims to be in control of the state of Israel and for them to have their way and to be able to do what they want. What she is suggesting is not everybody to get along. What she is suggesting is for Muslims in the Middle East to conquer Israel. That's her one-state solution. I'm for a two-state solution. I want, if Caleb Colquitt had the ability to do what he wanted to with the world, that's a scary thought. There would be Israel, and there would be the surrounding nations, and they wouldn't bother one another. Doesn't mean they wouldn't be able to have friendly relations. Doesn't mean that there would be not open borders. Of course, there would be, a check system to make sure dangerous people don't get in. Doesn't mean there couldn't be exchange of goods and everything else. But there needs to be two separate states, especially when you consider the occupants of both of these states have a religion that teaches that their religion must be a part of the government. And I'm not saying this is a good thing or a bad thing. I'm stating it as a matter of fact. This is the belief of those that adhere to both Judaism and Islam. Now, obviously, I wish all of these people would become Christians and be baptized in the name of Christ for the remission of their sins and join the church, and then it wouldn't be as big a problem, but that's not going to happen. So, considering both of these people have religions that demand that their government they influence their government with their religion and vice versa, a two-state solution is the only feasible solution that is going to happen. And then there's the second part of this. Rashida Talib completely rewrote history and was talking about the Arabs accepting Jews into the Middle East, and that being what created the state of Israel, which is wrong on a number of levels. Not only is she just making up history at this point, she's rewriting and saying the opposite of what actually happened. If you know the history and you know the history of the Middle East and how that took place, and when England basically created a state for Israel and moved a lot of the Jews there, if you understand the history of how that happened, not only did the Arabs resist, and not only did the Arabs kill the Jews and continue to try to kill the Jews residing in Israel up to this very day, but they also sided with Adolf Hitler. If you know your World War II history, these were people that were sympathetic to Hitler's cause. And I want to point out the scary similarity between that time and now. And I'm not somebody that just throws out comparisons to World War II lightly. I take it very seriously. My grandfather was a World War II vet, and I think most of the time when people throw out doing comparisons between the World War II era and now, most of the time it's overblown or incorrect, or there's a number of differences that would make the comparison null and void. But I'm saying just in this one instance, it scares me that you are seeing an alliance between socialists and Muslims. And what seems to be the binding glue that holds them together? Their hatred of Jews. It's the same thing now that was happening back then. I'm not saying in exactly the same way, but you had National Socialists, the Nazis, allying themselves with anti-Semites in Islam, anti-Semites in the Middle East. And the only thing that bound them together, because, I mean, Hitler was a committed Darwinist. He is not somebody that liked, you talk about somebody that didn't like brown people. I mean, Adolf Hitler was the biggest testament in the world to that. If that's the case, then why would he ever side with the people in the Middle East? Why would he side with the Arabs? Because they hated the Jews just as much as he did. And they were able to unite under that common idea. And it's the same thing that's going on now. You're seeing people like Ilhan Omar and Rashida Talib, radical Muslims, siding with the socialists on the political left. If there was ever a fitting comparison, and I'm not saying that, again, don't take this the wrong way. I'm not saying it's alike in every single way. I'm not saying that these people want to go out and murder 6 million Jews. I'm just saying that it is creepy how in America we're seeing exactly the same thing that played out on the world stage in World War II. We're having radical Muslims like Talib, like Omar, like Farrakhan, side with socialists like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders. It's really scary how the same anti-Semitism seems to be binding these people together. The same secularism and hatred of religion that drove the socialist and the communist in World War II, that same belief, which causes them to hate Jewish people, is causing them to ally themselves with religious zealots that also happen to hate the Jews. It's sickening and it's disgusting, but it's what we're dealing with right now. And Rashida Talib can try to rewrite history all she wants. She can try to pretend as though the Arabs were welcoming and brought the Jews in. But I'm sorry, that's not true. And there was a great piece that I was reading earlier today that it made this point, and I thought that it was so profound, and it's nothing that I wouldn't have thought of. It's just I had never thought of it in these terms, and I want to give credit where credit is due. One of the things that he brought up is he says, it seems as though what was going on in this interview with Rashida Talib is that Talib was actually trying to be magnanimous. That she was trying to be nice to the Jews, that she was trying to actually say something nice, and trying to be conciliatory to kind of hide the fact that she wants the Muslims to have control over Israeli land. But he said, that's the problem with this is that she is so neck deep. She is so drowning in anti-Semitism that even when she tries to say something nice and positive about the Jews, it's anti-Semitic. Even when she tries really hard not to be anti-Semitic, it's still anti-Semitic because the entirety of her worldview revolves around this idea that the Jews are the cause of, if not all, most of the world's problems. And I think that that's exactly right. She has done this so long. She has been in this mindset for the entirety of her life. Her religion teaches this stuff because she has been in that world. She has been in that bubble for the majority of her life. She can't even intentionally try to be nice to the Jews and pull it off. Because even when she tries to, it comes out anti-Semitic. She's so accustomed to it that she doesn't even realize that those habits are still affecting her, even when she's trying to avoid them. And it really is tragic to see the left actually defend anti-Semites in this matter. It really, really is sickening. And speaking of religious intolerance, there was more news that came out today that affects specifically Christians. So, as I understand it, there was a woman on the U.S. soccer team, so the U.S. soccer team for the ladies, that they were going to do a pro-gay jersey. They were going to do some kind of rainbow jersey and basically do, you know how they do the pink for breast cancer awareness, or they'll do different colors for different causes. A lot of baseball teams, which I think is really cool, will do military night now where they'll have the camo jerseys. So sports teams do this, and it's not that uncommon or not something that should be all that surprising to us. But this particular one, they were trying to do a pro-gay jersey, basically jerseys that show solidarity with the gay agenda. One of the women on the team is a Christian, and she said, I'm not going to do that. Now, the person, I think she's one of the, maybe the captain or somebody that holds an important position on this team, refuses to stand for the national anthem, specifically because she is a lesbian and believes that America is somehow being unfair to her. Again, I don't really know how, but that's what she believes, and nonetheless, even though I disagree with it, she has the right to do it, obviously. So this girl, who is a Christian, obviously does not have a problem with gay people, in the sense that she doesn't have a problem playing with players that are lesbians, but she's saying there's a difference in that and wearing a jersey that affirms that I am on board with their agenda. I think I'm a Christian. I think this is sinful. I'm not going to do it. So now she's been cut from the team. This is blatant religious persecution. And I would like to point out that when we were talking about the gay wedding cakes and the the florists that were trying to get Christians to do their floral arrangements for weddings, things like that, we essentially heard this one point over and over again, which is, well, Christians just shouldn't be bakers anymore. If you can't bake a cake for everybody, then you ought just not be in the business. You got to close your doors down. Same thing for florists, same thing for photographers, people associated, really anybody that was associated with the wedding business, which, by the way, I've been both a DJ and a bartender, so I've done weddings, and I've been a minister for a wedding, so I've done a lot of different things when it comes to weddings. I've been pretty involved with them for a large amount of my life. And essentially the assertion here was, well, if you're going to run a venue that hosts weddings, or you're going to have anything that has anything to do with a wedding, and you're not going to do it for a gay wedding, you just shouldn't have that job. And then you remember when the Obergefell case came through, and we had that clerk up in Kentucky that refused to sign off on the marriage licenses. They said, well, Christians can't be bakers or florists or photographers or county clerks or serve in any capacity where they would have to be involved in the marriage licenses. We've now crossed another Rubicon. Now, we crossed a Rubicon when we got to that point, but now we've crossed another one. We're saying, if you're going to be in any kind of organization, even one like the United States Olympics team, which doesn't have anything to do with homosexual marriage at all, you also can't do that job because they might want to do something that promotes the gay agenda. And if you're not going to get on board with that, you can't be a part of the team anymore. It's hilarious to me that the people that get so upset about Christians being intolerant are by far the least tolerant people there are. Because if this were, and it's ironic that we were just talking about this with Rashida Talib, if we were saying, you know what, the U.S. soccer team, America is a Christian nation, we assert Christian values, and what we're going to do is one of our jersey designs is we're going to have a jersey that has a cross on it and says Jesus is Lord. And there was a Muslim girl or a Jewish girl that said, I'm sorry, I don't think Jesus is God. I think he was a prophet, or in the case of the Jew, I don't think that he was the Messiah. And so I'm not going to wear that. I don't believe that is true. And we said, nope, get off the team. Can you imagine the reaction for that? I get that switching it around is sometimes a low-hanging fruit, but it's just so obvious. And to anybody that is thinking about this for more than 5 consecutive seconds, about if the situation were reversed, would it be something that was tolerated by the media and people on the left? The answer is absolutely no. First of all, they would object to any kind of religious statement being made on a jersey, which, again, to reverse it, I object to a pro-gay agenda jersey being made for the U.S. team. But nonetheless, ignore that for a second. They would object to just that, but they would talk about how evil and bigoted and intolerant Christians were for not even allowing somebody to be on the team, not even to allow them to play soccer with them because they will not affirm their religious beliefs. How is this any different? How is this any different? If you are saying that because you believe certain things and you do not get on board with our agenda, in this case, the homosexual agenda, that you are not allowed, you are not welcome to be a part of our team, you have to go away. That's the textbook definition of intolerance. Somebody else having an idea you don't like and saying, I refuse to associate with you because I do not like this idea that you have. That's the definition of intolerance. And they don't see the irony. And I don't understand, because again, if you think about it for more than 5 consecutive seconds, if you even consider the possibility that you may be inconsistent here, it's abundantly obvious to everybody looking on that this is intolerance, that this is persecution based on a person's beliefs. And yet they don't see it somehow. Again, if this were reversed, if this were done to a Jewish girl or a Muslim girl being asked to assert something in Christianity, or vice versa, if it were if it was Muslims being asked to wear a Star of David or something like that, and they said no, and they promptly kicked them off the team in response to that, the media would have had a field day with that. You better believe there would be lawsuits coming forthwith. I don't understand why Christianity is the only thing that is supposedly your offense doesn't matter. You being offended by that jersey, you saying that I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to engage. I don't mind working with gay people. I don't mind having a relationship with them or conversing with them or associating with them. But I'm not going to wear a jersey that says that homosexuality is okay when I don't believe that it is. That is enough to get you disassociated from the team. It's ironic that this is the U.S. women's soccer team, because there is nothing American about the way that she is being treated. And what this is really a sign of, and I've been saying this for a long time, I said it before the Obergefell case, I said it before even the gay bakers and the various cases that came out with that. The long-term goal is to make it completely unacceptable for any expression of Christian faith in the public sphere. Because this is a career that has nothing to do with gay marriages at all. And I said at the time, when they made a big case about that, that is the end goal. That they want any expression of the Christian faith to be cast out of society. They want religion to be something that you do in the privacy of your own home where nobody else can hear, and you can have your religion fine, but you can't tell anybody else about it, and you can't do anything that would suggest to anybody else that you were a Christian. That is the long-term goal. That's eventually what they want, to where to express your Christian faith isn't just something that would prevent you from being a baker or an artist or a florist or a dress designer or anything like that. That eventually you expressing your Christian faith gets you cast out of polite society to where you can't really have any career, that you can't work in a polite society. It's as un-American and intolerant as it gets. But speaking of people that are woefully intolerant on a number of levels, let's discuss the Democrat field, because I haven't done this a whole lot, and mostly because we're a local show. And it's not that I'm not interested or not that I can't speak about it. It's just that usually, because local news takes priority, we here at Tactics tend to not talk about that. Not because we don't enjoy it, just because, local news comes first. And so when we come back, we are going to give you an update on everything going on in the Democrat field and because there are a lot of bad ideas out there. It seems like this weekend, every Democrat decided, I'm going to come up with the stupidest thing anyone has ever said and make that my policy. So we'll get to that in just a second. We'll be back.
Hey, where you going? Champ? Slugger? Hey, cowboy. Where you going? Where you going?
I'm going out!
All right, here we are. So you guys remember last year, one of the things I talked about in a segment called Straw Wars is how the liberals, despite no scientific evidence or backing whatsoever, believe that somehow they are saving the sea life by banning plastic straws. In response to this, Mellow Mushroom has started giving out paper straws as opposed to plastic straws. So what we're going to do is we're going to see how effective the paper straws are with the most difficult drink to drink, a milkshake. Let's see how this stands up. All right, so first of all, I got about 2 sips out of that, and the paper stuck to my lips. This thing does not work too well. Boy, it'd take you 2 hours to drink this with this.
Well, see, I'm using plastic.
That's John from Millbrook, by the way. He's
And I
the one
don't
driving.
care. I think they use plastic because that's the best thing to use.
This thing sucks. Well, actually, it doesn't suck. If it sucked, I'd be fine with it, but it doesn't. This milkshake will melt before I finish this. All right. Experiment over. It's biodegradable. All right. We're going to fix this now. There we go. Good old petroleum-based plastic straws. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Oh, that's so much better.
I got a question about this.
Oh yeah?
With the paper, aren't they concerned about the trees, having to cut down the trees to make the straws too? Is that not a...
Well, that's one of the points that I made. It doesn't matter what you make the straw out of. You're expending some kind of resource.
Well, yeah, because we all live here.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, it doesn't matter what you make any product out of. You're expending some kind of resource. Mm-hmm. And that's true of straws or anything else. Well, I tell you this. Just based on this little experiment, I know that I saw that Disney is planning to go completely paper straw by 2020 on all their cruise lines and all of their amusement parks. I contend that Disney World is not the happiest place on earth if I can't drink a Dead Blame milkshake while I'm there.
But I will, to their defense, say one thing.
Oh?
You can take a pocket knife in. So help me.
That's something.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right, so even though this went about the way I expected it to, paper straw experiment failed miserably. I imagine if I had left it in there much longer, it would have dissolved. I had a buddy the other day that went to a place that used paper straws. He said he had to order 6 different straws throughout the course of his meal because they kept dissolving on him. Which I'm sitting there thinking, you can't tell me that using 1 plastic straw is worse for the environment than 6 paper straws. I mean, that's just common sense. Anyway, all right, thanks, guys. I'm going to enjoy the rest of my milkshake.
And welcome back. By the way, I did want to mention this too, since we just did an Out on the Town segment. I was on my way to do the show actually just right before, and I'm coming from my new place on Atlanta Highway, so I was coming from the opposite direction that I normally do, because before, when I lived in Millbrook, I would come down I-65. Now I live, over that way, and so I was on Atlanta Highway, and I'm driving down trying to get to the studio, and lo and behold, the computer commuter van is right next to me, and there's Kevin Elkins just sitting there, and I passed him because he drives slow. And I waved at him, didn't notice me. Then we got stopped at a red light, pulls up right next to me. I'm waving at him like this. I'm making all kinds of motions, still completely oblivious, doesn't even notice me. But oh well. So the Elk Man, he is walking around. I'm sure he's probably helping somebody out with their computer. So if you need some computer repairs, check him out. Just give him a free plug there. There were a lot of dumb ideas over the weekend, and I hope that we'll have enough time to discuss all of them. We do have a biscuit game, so I may have to cut this a little bit short. But a lot of this is happening because the liberals are trying super hard to out-liberal each other. The reason is, it's the same thing that you see in every primary with every party. This happens with the Republicans too. They all go conservative in the primary, and then they go more liberal the more they are in the general. which granted was not true in the case of Trump, because he was not conservative when he was running in the primary, and he was not conservative when he was running in the general. Now, granted, he wasn't liberal either. He was just all over the map. Look, I'm not saying that as a criticism. I wish that he were more conservative, obviously, but the strategy obviously worked for him because the guy's president now. But we did see it with Hillary. Hillary tried to really appeal to that progressive base when she was running in the primary against Bernie. Once she had the nomination more or less secured, she started going more moderate. We're going to see the same thing with the Democrat field right now. Joe Biden, for example, was saying just the other day that he's the most progressive person in the field, which Bernie Sanders' response to that was actually weirdly appropriate. He was essentially like, I think if you look at the voting record, well, I'm a socialist. Which, I mean, that's a heck of a point. Bernie's not wrong. I don't think that you could look at Bernie's voting record and look at Biden's voting record and say that Biden is the most progressive. Now, he's certainly no moderate. Joe Biden has always been a very liberal person. He's been liberal even by Democrat standards for a long time. When Joe Biden is your moderate candidate, look out, Democrat Party, you have gone way to the left. When Joe Biden is the voice of reason, when Joe Biden is the guy closest to the middle, running in your field of 20,000 people. I mean, it seems like every Democrat is running for office now. But when it comes to these ideas, they're all trying really hard to out-liberal each other, and it is really hilarious watching some of the really stupid ideas they will take on to try to up their progressive cred. So Joe Biden, for example, over the weekend, saying that Medicare for all ought to include illegal immigrants. Now, this is especially ironic because Joe Biden wasn't just a Democrat during the Obama years, and when Obamacare was passed, he was the vice president. He was the president's number 2 guy. And he was somebody that was there when they were making the pitch to the American people and to Congress about Obamacare and the reason that it needed to be passed. And do you remember that one of the concerns that was voiced by people like me on the right is that if this happens, they're eventually going to give it to illegal immigrants? And they said, no, that's crazy. This is just for citizens. And by the way, this isn't me saying this. This was Barack Obama, Joe Biden's former boss, saying that, no, this will never be used for illegal immigrants. This is something that only pertains to citizens. And in fact, people like me were called racist for saying that it could be used for illegal immigrants, and that's a reason not to pass it. It was a conspiracy theory. We were talking about it being just another form of redistribution of wealth, and it's going to wind up going to illegal immigrants and their kids, and we're going to be footing the bill for it. And they said, no, that's just a crazy conspiracy theory. There's no reason to believe that, and this is just people that oppose the bill philosophically, which of course I did, trying to scare you into not supporting the bill. And here we are, just about 8 years later, because remember, Obamacare wasn't passed as soon as Obama came into office. It took a couple years for that to take place, about a year and a half. Here we are roughly 8-ish years later, and the vice president of the guy who told you this would never be used for illegal immigrants is saying we should expand it to illegal immigrants. Well, if we're using the same standard that was used on me back then that, I guess, makes Joe Biden a racist now. But nonetheless, this is what he's saying. And Biden doing this specifically trying to up his progressive credit, trying to woo the progressive voters away from Bernie, which I don't see that really happening. The Bernie bros are very loyal to Bernie, and I don't see him being able to pull away that more progressive vote. I think Joe Biden probably still has enough of the vote that's not totally progressive, and the Democrat leadership is far more progressive than the Democrat Party as a whole. And so I think Joe Biden has enough of that to be able to pull enough Democrats to his side to win the primary even without the progressive vote. But he is trying to woo the progressive vote with that. He is trying to up his progressive cred and also stay kind of the moderate candidate at the same time. It's quite a juggling act. But based on recent polling, he seems to be pulling it off because he is by double digit. He's in double digit leads in a lot of these polls. But Kamala Harris immediately joined in and saying every resident, not citizen, every resident in the United States should get health care and education for free. So again, they're all trying to out-liberal each other. So she has before said that, okay, Joe Biden's saying that we should give free health care to the illegal immigrants. So I'm going to say we should give free health care and education to illegal immigrants. Everybody within our borders, regardless of whether they're citizens or not, regardless of whether they broke the law or not to get here, none of that. Everybody comes in, everybody gets free health care, everybody gets free education. All of them. So that's Kamala Harris's latest thing. So she's trying to out-liberal Joe Biden as well. Here's my question about this, though. What about the crisis with the VA? Why is it the position of the Democrat Party that they have completely destroyed the VA? I mean, completely wrecked it. The thing is a huge disaster. They can't even get that government health care right. And now they are saying we need to expand that to everybody. And when regardless of who it is, whether it's child, adult, whatever, comes across a border, that person now will be given immediate medical attention for whatever it is that they need, regardless of their immigration status, regardless if they are being accepted into the United States or going to be deported later. They have to be given immediate medical attention. It's kind of like walking in to an ER, which, by the way, illegal immigrants do all the time. And that's essentially their free health care anyway, because you can't turn someone away in an emergency room. Why is it they're so incredibly concerned with that and they haven't fixed the VA? Remember that the senator that is in charge of the committee that handles the Veterans Affairs hospitals is Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is the guy in charge of that. And the disaster that has been the VA, and I don't know, the people working in the VA are good folks. They just want to help veterans. I'm not blaming them, but the management is a nightmare. And I don't even think it's necessarily the manager's fault. It's just something that comes in part and parcel with being a big government program. Mismanagement is the norm, not the exception when it comes to government programs like that. There's a reason there's government bureaucracy, red tape. It's a lot harder to get fired from a government job. There's a number of reasons why this is the case. But the point is, we have veterans dying on waiting lists trying to get help from the VA, and we're giving immediate medical assistance to illegal immigrants that have never done anything for our country. So we're ignoring the people that have given the most for our country and taking their hard-earned money and their tax dollars and your hard-earned money and your tax dollars to pay for the health care of people who broke the law to get here and aren't even citizens? I don't know what kind of crack Kamala Harris is smoking, but it must be some good stuff if she thinks this is a good idea. That is absolutely insane. And Kamala Harris and Joe Biden are both in favor of this, and presumably a large portion, maybe all, of the Democrat field also believes this. Furthermore, and this brings me to a larger point, can't be done. You cannot have a generous welfare state and simultaneously have open borders. Can't do it. Unless you have incredibly strict provisos and restrictions on people coming in and being able to partake in that welfare state, you cannot have a generous welfare state. This is something that Milton Friedman famously talked about, but it's not just conservatives like that. You know, Bernie and the other candidates, they're constantly saying, Bernie says this all the time, we need to be like the Scandinavian countries, like Denmark and Norway. Yeah, well, you know something about those Scandinavian countries? Yes, they do have a very generous welfare state. They're not technically socialist because they do still have market-based economies, and actually recently they've moved more towards the free market system because that generous welfare state has actually crippled them and crippled their economy and their productivity. But nonetheless, they do have that very generous welfare state. But there are also tiny little countries that are super restrictive when it comes to immigration, because they saw very quickly that when they didn't have all that much restriction and they started offering all these government programs, it didn't take them long to figure out, well, people that haven't been paying into the system all this time can just come right over the border and then take advantage of all of those systems. And that's the reason that of all the nations where it's difficult to become a citizen, Norway is among, I think it actually is the most difficult country on earth to become a part of as an actual citizen. And that's because they realize they can't have this generous welfare state and open borders at the same time. So Democrats, you got to pick. And I would rather have neither of these things, honestly. Well, I actually could be persuaded to have open borders if we got rid of the welfare state altogether. But you can't have open borders and a welfare state, because all that's going to do is bring everybody in to partake of the system and not be incentivized to pay for it. If I were to walk out onto the sidewalk right here in Montgomery and say, I don't know, something, we'll even use something inexpensive. Let's say fudgesicles, you can pay for them or you can get them for free. There would be some people that would probably pay. There would be some that, because they have a little spending money and they just think it's the right thing to do, they might throw me a tip, some money here or there to pay for the fudgesicles that I'm handing out. But don't you think that I would lose money on that venture? That the vast majority of people coming by, if they don't have to pay, they're not going to. And so that's the problem that we run into. When you offer something for free, that greatly incentivizes more people coming in, and they know it, and they know that those people tend to vote Democrat, and that those people's children who are now anchor babies and now have citizenship, those people are going to vote for them. This is a giant carrot that they are waving in front of the rest of the world, saying, come to America, and they know that once those people come here and set down roots, more than likely, those people are going to vote for Democrats. It's the only reason they're dangling this out there. This isn't about morals. This isn't about taking care of people. This is about breeding voters. End of discussion. Now, it looks like we're about to run out of time, so I would love to get to a couple of these other things, and we will get to those soon. But since we are quickly running out of time, I think it's we need to just go ahead and go to the chaplain's report.
In 1775, the Continental Congress created the Chaplain Corps. Under the command of General George Washington, each soldier was required to attend worship service every Sunday. While other armies advanced on their feet, Washington's troops advanced on their knees. It's time for the Chaplain's Report with Caleb Colquitt on tactics.
The chaplain's report today comes from the book of Daniel. We are going to continue our look into the book of Daniel, and we'll just go into the text here in a second. Again, just for those of you that haven't really been keeping up, we've had the lead up to Daniel in the lion's den, the king being duped into making a rule that anybody that would pray to any god other than him would wind up in the lion's den. He's unable to undo one of those laws once he signed it. Daniel gets caught praying during that time period. They throw Daniel in the lion's den even though the king really doesn't want to. And we see the reaction after the night is passed in Daniel 6:19 through 22. Then the king arose at dawn, at the break of day, and went in haste to the lion's den. When he had come near the den to Daniel, he cried out with a troubled voice. The king spoke and said to Daniel, Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you constantly serve, been able to deliver you from the lions? Then Daniel spoke to the king, O king, live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the lion's mouth, and they have not harmed me, insomuch as I was found innocent before him. And also toward you, O king, I have committed no crime. Now, one of the things that we talked about earlier is a form of religious persecution. It doesn't get more religiously persecuting than that for practicing or expressing your faith, even in the privacy of your own home, just because other people happen to be able to see you and catch you, that your life would be forfeit, that you would be able to be killed and eaten by lions after that. That just because you prayed to your God, you could be killed. And yet we see Daniel's reaction, and it's pretty profound. Daniel has faith that God is going to take care of him. And what's more amazing is that Darius, he is so inspired by Daniel's faith that he believes that God is going to take care of him. Now, he's still worried. He was still up the entire night fretting about this, and it's understandable. He's afraid that he might lose a really good friend. But you'll notice how Darius refers to God after this, that even before he has seen the miracle come to its full fruition, that even before he has seen God actually deliver Daniel for the lion's den, because he doesn't know, for all he knows, that Daniel's lion food at this point. He seems to have a faith in God and exalts him as the Most High, the living God. So it's clear that Daniel's influence and his teaching has had a profound effect on the king. Maybe not a profound enough effect for him to realize that it was a really bad idea to pass this law in the first place a few days ago, but this is a harrowing experience for the king. And the king now has a much different perspective to offer when it comes to having faith that he is going to protect Daniel. And I also want you to notice here that he says, I have committed no crime against God. I have been found innocent in his eyes, and I have committed no crime against you. What does that mean? On the very technical side, Daniel absolutely committed a crime against the king. The king made a law, which it was within his legal authority to do, and Daniel broke that law. Regardless of whether or not you think the law was a good idea, Darius certainly didn't. Regardless of whether or not you think that law was just, Daniel did break the law of the Medes and the Persians and suffered the consequences for it. But yet you'll notice he says, I've committed no crime against you, and I've committed no crime against God. Why? Because God's law trumps man's law. That Daniel had in no way injured or harmed King Darius in any way. And so, looking at it from the moral lens, and Darius knows this and Daniel knows this, there is nothing that happened between he and Darius where Daniel, praying to his God, inflicted some kind of injury or slight against King Darius. Darius was not somebody that was worthy of worship. Darius was not somebody that ought to be prayed to and petitioned to as though he is a god. God is, and that's the difference. And so Daniel kept Darius in his proper place and a respect for his authority as his king. But he had greater respect for the greater authority of his father, the King of Heaven. And so even though it was against the laws of the land, even though it was technically illegal according to the laws of the Medes and the Persians, which King Darius had written at that point, it wasn't against God's law. And Daniel recognizes the superiority of that law. He recognizes that it was incorrect. It was an incorrect law, and it actually somewhat reminds me of the concept we see from Martin Luther King's letter from a Birmingham jail. That ultimately, there are some laws that are unjust. There are some laws that enslave man, but God's laws make man free. That was something that Darius and Daniel experienced firsthand that day, when God sent his angels into the lion's den to be with Daniel and shut up the mouth of a hungry lion, that saved Daniel from the threat to his life. Because God was showing, my law is supreme, and it will be adhered to. And that goes for somebody like Daniel, and it even goes for somebody that was, at the time, the king and ruler of most of the known world. God was asserting the superiority of his law as the true king of all creation. Stay the course, friends.
Tactics is a production of News Radio 1440 and Cumulus Media Montgomery. Any opinions expressed on this program are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of Cumulus Media. The theme song for Tactics is 6 Foot Town by Big and Rich. Graphics by Jessica Dawson. Broadcast studios provided by Cumulus Media Montgomery. Location studios provided by the Dalraida Church of Christ. Copyright 2019.